Is a real doctor working the ER. Dr. Michael Daignault, everyone. Come on. Yes. Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you for joining us. So, this is an interesting place we find ourselves in. I'll leave the tariffs to the side, although I kind of referenced healthcare and the
Mhm.
fact that we are kind of a service economy, really. And I didn't think that stock was taken of that by the president in his remarks and his economic policy. But again, let's put that to the side. And I want to talk about what's happening elsewhere in the administration, because at the CDC under RFK Jr., there are a bunch of well, there are thousands of people who have lost their jobs, but most recently, there were a bunch of people fired who he fired mistakenly. And he said, oh, no, no, we want to rehire them. They were fired by mistake. Can you speak to this?
Yeah, it's been a rough week. So HHS across the board slashed 10,000 jobs. So not only at the CDC, as you mentioned, I think it was 2,400 scientists, researchers lost their jobs at the CDC, another 3,500 at FDA, and then 1,200 at NIH. And RFK's argument, in alignment with what Doge and Elon were doing, is that there are too many redundancies, too many bureaucrats, and they're saying that our healthcare metrics are just getting worse despite all the money and despite all the staff. But the people that they fired, as you mentioned, were researchers and scientists that are involved in making sure our food supply is safe, reviewing new medications that come onto market from pharma. And as you mentioned, in the last 24 hours, RFK has said, "Oh, we made a mistake. We fired too many people." One of those groups was reviewing. So there was a case of a lead exposure at a school in Milwaukee, and the school reached out to CDC, and there was no one there in the office to help them manage this lead exposure in the school. And the second thing is, we've talked about multiple times with bird flu. This week, there were 40 centers across the United States that were going to be involved in testing our food supply, particularly dairy products, to make sure that there wasn't any bird flu. That whole program's been canceled because there's just no staff, no researchers able to do it. And a lot of the cuts, if you look at CDC, FDA, and NIH, are focused on infectious disease. It's really bizarre to me. They are so scared. I don't know if this is coming from just how they felt about how COVID was handled, but they are just slashing infectious disease coverage, particularly HIV research. 230 grants at NIH were canceled that are focused on HIV. And it's just baffling to me what's going on.
So, part of RFK Jr.'s pitch is always, your natural immunity, take some vitamin A,
Yeah.
rub some margarine on your nose, whatever it is. I mean, it's really, it is kind of voodoo
Mhm.
medicine based on what I'm hearing from you and what I've read.
Yeah.
In dealing with serious disease, I mean, bird flu among those things that he's talked about. Measles, is the one where he talked about vitamin A quite specifically. But what I'm wondering is, are you seeing maybe what is something that people feared in RFK Jr., which is a break back against conventional medicine, if you want to think of it that way, um,
Mhm.
in in his both his firings and his defunding of so many of these things that might have been helpful in waging the fight against what are a lot of persistent disease problems that we're having worldwide.
Right, and a lot of the firings were in communication staff, particularly at CDC. There's a number of offices there that are involved with coordinating public health messages to give us information, and particularly the ones on bird flu are all silenced. So, you look around, you say, have there been any new cases of bird flu in humans? We don't know. And it's almost like they just choose to just ignore it, don't talk about it, don't communicate to us, hope it goes away. It's kind of almost how Trump was handling COVID in early 2020, where they just didn't want to talk about how many infections there were and just hoping that it was going to go away. And I'm sure we'll get to more on measles, but one thing I wanted to touch on, particularly with vitamin A, is that I've been told that in Lubbock, Texas, the pediatricians at one of the children's hospitals there when they were treating kids recently with severe measles, kids that weren't vaccinated, they noticed that some of these kids had jaundice, like their skin was yellow, and they were like, this is a little odd. So they checked their blood test to look at the liver function, and they found that they had, liver injury, advanced liver disease, and that was because they were getting high doses of vitamin A from their parents, from cod liver oil, from going to quack doctors in the area that were recommending taking a bunch of vitamin A to prevent measles, and so they're coming in with severe liver toxicity. And
Albert, could you show Albert or Kim? Can you show? I think the doctor sent a chart about measles, and in Texas, you see. I think the chart is pertaining to. There you go. Yeah, this is hospitalization rates
Mhm,
from influenza and measles
right.
in Texas. Go ahead, doctor. You go. It's a very simple chart to understand, but can you walk us through it?
Yeah, and the thing that when he did that interview on Fox, when he was eating the fries and the what the name of that, the beef tallow oil, and he was saying, there's doctors on the ground in Texas that are doing amazing things and treating patients with measles with high doses of vitamin A, and that spread in that community. That misinformation spread. Parents were giving their kids vitamin A, and it led to kids getting hurt and kids requiring hospitalization not only for severe measles but vitamin A toxicity. And you talk about Trump's malpractice with the tariffs in our economy. This is medical malpractice from the head of HHS. Like that in and of itself, I mean, he should resign. I mean, that is so detrimental to our public health that you're telling parents and to do this, and they're harming their kids. It's just heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah, I think it's the power of his the bully pulpit. It's the power of his megaphone. It's so much louder, and it's reverberated across a lot of alternative media. So
Right.
you get these alternative cures or alternative
Mhm.
ways in which you can prevent yourself from contracting disease, and it's just spoken of again in this media ecosphere that is so friendly to quackery.
Right.
But to see it as public policy is it's extremely disturbing. I mean, as you say, I mean, it's really capsized the vessel of good health.
Yeah, and just to segue a little bit into measles, if we can. I mean, I was looking at the numbers today. We're over 600 cases already by the beginning of April, and when we first talked about measles a couple weeks ago, it was Texas, New Mexico. Now we're looking at Alaska, California, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Vermont, Washington. It's unbelievable, and that's in a matter of weeks. I mean, this is literally going epidemic. And I was also told that in West Texas, a number of the free measles vaccination sites were closed. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's mind blowing when you have a readily available vaccine that provides 97% protection for all of your life against measles. That's readily available. It's so easy. One of the other things I want to mention for viewers that's important is, the first dose for the MMR vaccine is around 12 to 14 months, but now because of the outbreak here and abroad in Europe, we're seeing increased cases of measles too. Parents, if you're traveling with your kids and they're under 12 months, so at least 6 months, you can get that first dose of measles MMR vaccine early, but you would still need to do the additional two. So that's if you are traveling internationally, if you're going to areas where there's a lot of measles and you're worried that your newborn is not at the age for the first dose, but they're 6 months old, you can get that first dose. So might be something to consider.
Does I wonder what you see, just thinking of the public policies that RFK Jr. has imposed, and I'm remembering that this is just from a couple of days ago, that he's funded now vaccine studies. That he has funded some pretty well funded, as I'm recalling, vaccine studies that seem almost reverse engineered to show problems with vaccines. And the reason I say this is it seems as though the people associated with doing these studies, those who have been given these grants through RFK Jr. and HHS, they are, to call them vaccine skeptics is to be kind. I mean, they're anti-vaxxers.
Yeah, you're right. And, we talked about this briefly before, but he announced that the CDC is going to commission a study looking at possible connections between vaccines, particularly the MMR vaccine, which is the major target of the anti-vaxxers, and autism. And, like that's been studied ad nauseum for years, millions of kids across multiple studies. There's no connection between vaccines and autism. And the reason why we saw increased numbers of autism cases over the last few years is because the diagnosis has become a lot more broader. People are much more aware of it. We're doing more studies. Pediatricians are looking out for this. And so that's the reason why that went up. And, one thing to point out is one of their targets has always been that the use of mercury as a stabilization chemical in vaccines. They pointed to that level of mercury and saying that's the reason for um, having increased cases of autism. But we haven't used that in MMR vaccines for 25 years. And even when we stopped that and we stopped additional chemicals that they would point out that were just stabilization agents for the vaccines, the cases of autism continue to go up despite that. And so I feel like this study, the guy that they chose to lead this study is somebody he's a fraud. I mean, he was practicing medicine without a license. And you give that study to somebody like that, we know what the outcome is going to be of the study already. Like they're going to find some way to blame vaccines for autism, to blame vaccines for whatever they want to paint it on this time.
Exactly. That's my point. I mean, they've reversed engineered it. So all of this exists in this world of um, upheaval when it comes to U.S. healthcare. I wonder if you can touch on you mentioned AIDS and the fact that HIV and AIDS prevention has been a big part historically of the American soft power that we exercise worldwide. Now that's been pulled. Ebola responses are pulled. I think, Albert, you have a graphic on all of these different things that are associated with the cuts that this administration has been behind. There it is: malaria prevention, vaccine trials, bed nets cut, HIV, AIDS treatment for 20 million is at risk, Ebola response teams dismantled. Ebola is another very it's a deadly illness, right? I mean, it's deadly, and how communicable is Ebola? Just because we're on it.
Extremely.
Yeah.
And the way that they look at infectious disease as a problem happening over there and not here, and it's just mind blowing. Like any disease that starts somewhere else can end up on our shores, and it's exactly like you mentioned with the soft power. Like President George W. Bush, one of his milestone achievements was PEPFAR, which was this amazing program to fund antiretroviral treatment for people living with HIV and AIDS across the world. And it was a huge success, and it's been ongoing. We've continued to still fund this. And if you cut that off and you stop giving people antiretrovirals, even for a couple of days, you allow the virus to start propagating again. And then HIV steadily becomes AIDS, which is what, wipes out your immune system and makes you susceptible to a lot of other diseases and then could possibly kill you. And so, when we abandon that soft power vacuum of global health in those countries, other countries are going to fill that void, particularly China. And, President Trump is so concerned about the influence of China, but you're basically giving them a foothold in global health, whether that means pulling us out of WHO or defunding a lot of these global health programs that we've done for years.
You also point to famine and the detection of early warning for those areas sensitive to famine. Food aid tracking ended, maternal and child nutrition, prenatal care, fortified food cut. These are all programs that have been cut now at USAID and HHS.
Yeah, and I'm just it makes me very concerned. Working in the ER at the front line. I remember in New York when I was a resident there, when we had that Ebola scare, And depending on what day of the week it was, your team was responsible for screening anybody that came in with suspected Ebola symptoms or who had had travel, particularly to certain West African countries. And that was like a scary time where you're like, okay, it's Monday. Our team is going to be responsible. And somebody would come in with fever, body aches, recently overseas travel. And so, these diseases are not in a vacuum. And,
Well, the doctor in New York was the guy who got it. Remember, he went bowling. He said I had a headache or whatever. I didn't feel bad. It's not too so bad. He went bowling right there, I think in Brooklyn.
yeah, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. I want to quickly give you a couple of questions from our audience. Please ask Dr. Michael Daignault about new flu and COVID shots and what we should do if they don't come out. If the government doesn't produce them, what should we do about flu and COVID vaccines?
No, that's a great question because we talked on here before about how RFK canceled a lot of those meetings of the scientists and the researchers that happened early in the spring to determine what the makeup of the vaccines for COVID and flu are going to be for the fall. And so what happened was there was a closed door meeting of a couple officials, and they basically agreed to accept the recommendations that the WHO had already adopted for what is going to be in the flu vaccine for the fall. So but as far as COVID, what I'm hearing and what I, see on Twitter is that a lot of the RFK anti-vax followers are asking him to literally pull the COVID vaccine, the mRNA vaccines off the market. So I think that's a strong possibility that could happen. I can't see that happening for flu, but they are so anti anything with mRNA that it's become such a four-letter word for them. So I honestly have no idea what's going to happen with COVID for the fall, but at least we should have our annual flu shots available.
Nevitz Forever says we lucked out with COVID-19 vaccines. They worked as well as they did, mainly because of the basic research done from 20 years of paid government research, and now it will be stopped. It's just stupid. Yeah, it is true. Something related to that, the great thing about science research is that it builds on itself. A certain fact or series of facts is well established, and then you guys build on that. A certain treatment regimen is established, and then you realize, oh, wait, we can modify it this way, and we can actually improve on that treatment regimen. I mean, scientists do such a great job of layering and sharing their research and improving upon it and tweaking it. And I feel as though Nevitz Forever with that comment is right, that, the 20 years of research into how to treat this virus or pandemic or epidemic, whatever the situation might be, the healthcare needs are oftentimes treated by the healthcare research that goes on over decades.
Yeah, I mean, these researchers and scientists, particularly at NIH, constantly on the ground. I mean, it takes a long time to start a research study. You have to enroll participants. You have to have within a study a control group and then the research group. And you need a lot of people in the study. It takes a lot of years to come up with your findings. And then you have the FDA officials who are involved in reviewing, food safety, drug safety, and now we're not going to have a lot of those. And so it's going to take a lot longer for pharmaceutical companies to bring new medications, new antibiotics to market too.
I have so much I want to talk to you about, and I've spent a lot of time on this, so I'm not managing my time too well. But I wanted to ask you about something that is selfishly of interest to me, and that is on a cruise ship, because we've taken some cruises lately. On a cruise ship recently, a high-end cruise ship, it's the Cunard line,
Yeah.
I just imagine the Cunard line, everybody dressed in those, black tie and champagne constantly being, but they had a major norovirus outbreak. They had 200 people sickened by it. Tell me what norovirus is again, why it's, or how communicable it is, but more, I'm curious why cruise ships are sort of the floating petri dishes that we think of them as. Are they really the place that disease or bacteria or it can just grow more fertily than in other places?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this because you raised a really interesting question. Like, why is it always cruise ships? Why is it always norovirus. So if you remember over the winter, we actually had a lot of cases of norovirus in the United States, and um, there's multiple reasons why this happens on cruise ships. So first, primarily the virus itself, compared to other GI gastrointestinal bugs, norovirus has a very short incubation period, meaning that from the time you get exposed to the time you develop symptoms is really short, about 12 to 48 hours. So that allows for a very rapid spread. The second thing, on a cruise ship, you have in this case of this cruise ship, it was 2,000 plus passengers plus 200 crew in very tight quarters. Third, you share a lot of the same facilities, right? Where you eat, the pool, the entertainment venues. The fourth thing is you have frequent passenger embarkation, disembarkation, right? You're going to different ports, people are getting on, people are getting off. And then probably the main reason is that norovirus flourishes is, the environment, the ventilation systems, the shared water sources. If those aren't kept tip top, this thing will spread like wildfire through a cruise ship. And then finally, you have limited medical facilities. You don't have enough staff or places to keep patients and to treat them. And going back again to norovirus, this is very difficult to eradicate. Like the Purell, the alcohol in Purell does not kill norovirus. It has
Oh, that's fascinating. I
yes,
didn't know
it
that.
has a lipid shell that protects the virus. The only thing that really works is bleach.
Wow.
So you
Because they
gotta
have those Purell things everywhere on a cruise ship, but you're saying not
doesn't work.
a.
Nope.
Heather Kennedy says norovirus can survive for a long time on surfaces, I think. Is that right, Doctor? Yeah.
That's 100% right. And it's almost more of the hand rubbing, that like trauma of like literally breaking apart the virus envelope and the bleach that is going to kill it. And so, it's the false reassurance of having that Purell and even just like regular hand sanitizers and soap in the bathroom is not going to do it. And once that takes off, once it takes hold, because of the short incubation period, it spreads very quickly.
Wow. Wow. We have a
And
cruise to we have a cruise to Alaska next month, so I guess we'll bring the bleach though, which we should be okay. This from Donna McKee with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Donna, for that. We need to figure out how to get rid of RFK Jr. before he kills us and our loved ones. I chuckle, but it's true. I mean, he's a dangerous guy, and going after things very aggressively. And it's interesting too in the vetting process and confirmation process how he was sort of like, no, I'm not like that. That's been blown out of proportion. Then he gets into office, and of course, he just takes a blowtorch to everything. I wanted to ask you about Dr. Oz, who's joined the administration. Dr. Oz is confirmed now. He'll be heading up this group that will administrate to, is it Medicare? I believe that that's one of the things. Medicaid.
Mhm.
And Medicare will be under his purview, apparently. This is the television personality, and he ran for Senate as well, but he was confirmed, and he's viewed as this sort of quack doctor on one level, and I think also as a media personality on another level. What is your thought on Dr. Oz and his role within the administration?
It's interesting what you say. Like when during the hearings, a lot of them, Dr. Oz, RFK, even the ones that are appointed to the NIH, they were asked about their stances, particularly on vaccines. And in Dr. Oz's case, he was asked about a lot of the snake oil supplements that he sold over the years. And, they would, disavow that. They would say, no, I'm not anti-vax. But then they end up doing exactly what they said they were doing. I mean, it's like during the presidential the debates and last year the campaign season when Trump basically told us everything he was going to do, and we were like, no, he's not going to really do that. And then we've seen that they've done it. And so, it's just mind blowing because like a lot of the senators asked some good questions to these candidates when they were being confirmed, and they didn't hold them to it. They even had private meetings, and they felt assured after the meeting that they were not going to do these quackery things. They were not going to pursue this anti-vax agenda, and then they did it anyway. And it's just mind blowing. Like people literally have told them what they were going to do. In Dr. Oz's case with Medicare and Medicaid, the thing that is concerning is that there was a study that came out yesterday that 30% of Americans right now don't have access to quality medical care. And what Dr. Oz wants to do, what I've heard, is to privatize Medicare. And that's just going to make it even more difficult for people to have access to their doctors and the specialists they need. And what's going to happen is a lot of those patients without insurance are going to end up in the ER. And the ERs, emergency departments across the country, are already overloaded with patients. We have very long wait times. When I try to refer people to specialists, it can take months. And it gets to the point where their disease progresses so much because they can't follow up that they end up in the ER with severe complications, requiring admissions, where the plane has already crashed into the mountain at that point. And so that, we're going to see the brunt of that for sure.
Yeah, the privatization is something that, of course, they want across government. They want everything from the Postal Service to the military to health services to health insurance, all of it to be privatized. And beyond that, that's just a handful that I mentioned. Am I leaving anything out? We're out of time, but I don't want to leave anything on the table that I was supposed to get to. This is like a real doctor's office. When I go to the doctor's office, I'm going for one thing, but I go, don't forget to tell them about your hand, how you're having trouble with your hand. And then when I leave, I realize on the ride home, oh my God, I didn't mention the hand. So I'm asking you, doctor, did I leave anything out?
It's funny you mentioned that. So we have a term in the ER. It's called getting doorknobbed. So like you're done with the patient and you're leaving the room. You have your hand on the door, and they're like, wait. So I also wanted to ask you about
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I don't know if you can bring up that chart I sent you about the measles. It was the norovirus contagiousness.
Oh yeah, you do have a good thing on norovirus and how contagious it is. Albert, do you see that?
Be cool to get that up as a parting gift. Okay, yeah. So this is how we measure contagiousness of viruses. This is all the common GI bugs, and so at the bottom there you see norovirus, and so what it looks like R0, we call that R naught, and so that means for every one patient that's infected with norovirus, they transmit it to 2.2, so at least two other patients, or two other people. So that just shows you how contagious this is. If the R naught is less than 1, that means that it's probably going to burn out, meaning that one person is unlikely to give it to even one other person. But when you have an R naught of over 2 on a cruise ship of 2,000 people in tight quarters, it's the perfect storm for norovirus to take off. And this is the reason why it's always norovirus outbreaks on the cruise ship.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's really debilitating illness, right? It's a GI thing, right? It's coming out of both ends of you.
Yeah, it's like having the flu in your stomach, I guess is how I explain to patients. So it's nausea, vomiting, stomach cramps, diarrhea, fevers, chills. You lose a lot of volume through the diarrhea. You get dehydrated. You lose those important electrolytes. Can't keep anything down. The treatment is supportive, meaning that we usually do IV fluid, try to give back some potassium, magnesium, again, to the IV. It's an anti-nausea medication. And a lot of times, people just get sent home for bed rest and try to keep in as much fluid and replace all that loss as best they can. But
how long does it normally last?
It depends. I mean, it's longer than, a 24-hour bug, but, probably like 5 to 7 days. And
how long will I have to wait for it to pass through my system on my Alaska cruise, doctor? Here it is. Dave says, Mark, you'll have to wear a hazmat suit on your cruise. I know. I don't even want to go now. My God, the doctor's scared the hell out of me.
My question, if bleach is the only thing that kills the norovirus, and it's not good to put bleach on human skin, how do you fight it? What do you do?
Yeah, so, I wouldn't recommend taking pure bleach. You probably need to dilute it a little bit and wear gloves. So I always tell people when they go home and, to take some, industrial strength bleach, dilute it a lot, put on gloves, and then wipe down all the surfaces. So yeah, you're right. You don't want to have direct skin contact with that.
What do you do on the cruise ship? How do you avoid norovirus?
Good question. I hope they have bleach.
You don't go on the cruise. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute.
That would be good.
1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that?
Yeah.
By injection inside or almost a cleaning, because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number in the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that.
Yeah, maybe you should check on that, doctor, before your next vital signs. Why don't you jump on some of Lord Master Trump's recommendations for the human health?
You can recommend bleach for everything.
Yeah, apparently it works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Michael Daignault, you can find him in the emergency room. I wouldn't, I'm hoping maybe you're just passing by the emergency room. I wouldn't recommend getting into an emergency situation just to meet him. You'll find him here every other week. We do the vital signs breakdown with him. And we so appreciate your work. And you can find Dr. Michael Daignault across social media, DAIGNAULT, for those who are just listening and not seeing his name spelled there. Dr. Michael Daignault. Love our time together. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.